And joining us on the program, as he tends to do every week, he is Mike Folta, Utah Hockey Club radio play-by-play voice. Mike, we're disappointed that you can't check out these dogs here in person with us, man.
JJ and Alex, I am equally as disappointed, but I did get to spend a little bit of time with the Utah Hockey Club dog, Archie, the other night
Yes.
at the game against the Flyers. It's amazing how Archie is growing. It's also very sad because he was like
A puppy 2 seconds ago?
a couple weeks ago, it feels like. But they sent him out with like the hero of the game, and he's got his little puppy headphones on there, and he's little. I think it's a chocolate lab or a black lab, and he's adorable.
So what's the story with Archie? How did that all happen? He's got his own hats and memorabilia now.
The Archie hats, by the way, I don't know when those were introduced to the team store, but that they were stealing the show the other night. I saw a bunch of people walking around. It's just kind of like a normal hat with a silhouette of Archie on it. He's got his little mountain blue bandana. The story of Archie is the Utah Hockey Club is teaming up with a service that will raise a service dog and in tandem with the team. And then once Archie completes his training, he will be appointed to a U.S. serviceman or woman or
awesome.
first responder who could use a friend, could use a service dog. So he's gonna be adopted by someone who he can help. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a great story, but we get to enjoy him for the duration of his training, which is really fun.
That's awesome.
Man, I'll tell you what, last night was pretty fun. We had Dylan Guenther on the program about an hour ago. The star of last night's show, of course, not just getting the hockey club to overtime, but that it's just so rare to see that waning second goal. It's almost like it's just so hard to get that puck across that line before the horn sounds. We just assumed that thing was going to go into a shootout last night. How cool was it to see Dylan Guenther come back and get 3 points in his debut after his injury?
Well, you didn't have to worry about any rust for the 21-year-old after missing about a month due to an injury he sustained in early January. And he comes back with a vengeance. He scores at the buzzer, like you said. And it was funny. He said last night that he was really hoping that thing went in time because he hit a pretty big celly afterwards, and he didn't want to have to, get ready for a shootout or anything like that if it didn't beat the buzzer. But in my head, there was no way that didn't beat the buzzer. I thought that was good all the way. Maybe that's just me accustomed to seeing Dylan Guenther score, but it was surreal. And I mean, you guys just talked to him. Isn't it crazy that somebody so chill can inspire a moment that is so crazy, and it's just bedlam inside Delta Center? Meanwhile, Dylan Guenther is just cool as a cucumber, the most laid-back guy ever.
Yeah, his personality off the ice does not match the intensity that he plays with on it. There's no doubt about that. What a special moment last night. You've called a lot of games now for this club this season. Where does that moment rank among any others?
Boy, that's right up there. I mean, we were saying it throughout the broadcast last night, myself and Adrian Denny, that that felt like a playoff game. Even though the Flyers are in the Eastern Conference, just the energy in the crowd. It was the last day of voting on the name as well, so that had a little extra spark to it. And the fact that the team had lost a couple in a row, there was a desperation in the air last night, and I think that one is right up there. I would put that up there with opening night. We had a comeback overtime win against the Vancouver Canucks. We had a great win against the Carolina Hurricanes back in November when Karel Vejmelka made 49 saves. I think those are all kind of on the Parthenon of or Pantheon, I guess you could say, of Utah Hockey Club moments so far.
One of the things that we were mentioning from last night was just, that I think walking up to this game, Mike, one of the things that just kept being said was, there's a must-win game, there's a must-win game, there's a must-win game, which is a lot of pressure to put on, your guys and your team. And why was it such a big deal to be able to get that win and snap, not just because of the snapping of the losing streak, but why did it feel like it was so much more intense for them to be able to get that win last night?
I think it comes down to the standings, and this team has done such a good job of all year of staying in the moment and focusing on the task at hand. But here coming into February, I mean, this is where you're going to make or miss the playoffs. And Utah, as we sit right now, is 3 games out. They don't necessarily control their own destiny. They would need some help from Vancouver and and Calgary with 2.5 months left in the season. They would need some help from those two teams to leapfrog them, essentially. But I think it all has to do with the fact that here in February, like, this is where you start playing playoff hockey. You look at the best teams, the teams that make runs in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and they're typically starting to get to their peak around February, March, towards the end of the year. And Utah wants to be ascending that peak here soon instead of trending the opposite direction, which they were. And we've got the Four Nations break coming up as well. This team wants to finish strong before we get what's basically a 2-week break. But we're starting a really tough 3-game road trip off tomorrow night here in Columbus. And there's going to be 6 big points up for grabs against 3 pretty tough teams in Columbus, Washington, and Carolina. And so it's not going to get any easier for the Mountain Blue.
Mikhail Sergachev had another goal last night, a great goal. And you look back on the season, and you recognize and see the impact he's had. Just how impactful has he been? How important has he been for this team? And, you know, defensemen don't always get the same attention as some of the other guys, but he's certainly been huge this year for them. Yeah,
he has been, and he caught a couple minuses in the weeks before he got banged up, so that would be a couple weeks back. But, I mean, you look at his body of work this season in what is really his first full year as a true number one defenseman, right? Like in Tampa Bay, he had always kind of been in the shadow of Victor Hedman. And this year, he's the true top dog. Oh, as we get a bark in the background. He's the true alpha dog on that back end. And with how much he plays and in all the situations with which he plays, I mean, you could make the argument that he's the team MVP. He probably is a front runner for the team MVP just because of how much he plays for Utah and the different ways in which head coach Andre Tourigny uses him. But he's meant everything to this team. And this entire blue line, the defense core for Utah, has had to step up due to injuries. But hopefully that's starting to round back into shape. And there aren't a lot of teams that could lose 2 of their top 4 defensemen like Utah has with Sean Durzi and John Marino. Losing those 2 guys for, half the year or over half the year. Aren't a lot of teams that could lose 2 players of that caliber and stay in the playoff race, and that's what Utah is doing.
Mike Folta joining us, radio play-by-play voice, of course, of the Utah Hockey Club. Heading out on the road, and 3 more games. This is something we asked Dylan Guenther last hour, was how big of a deal it is to be able to go into that 2-week break on a high rather than, maybe going in there. Obviously, the 5-game losing streak getting snapped last night was a big deal. And keeping that energy up before this big break happens, and how important these next few games are going to be.
It's funny. I was talking with DJ and PK about this, and PK brought up a great point the other morning. He was saying, in college football, doesn't the bye week always come at the perfect time? Like, every coach ever will say, well, the bye week has come at the perfect time. We're getting guys healthy or whatever, and that's a little bit the case with Utah as well, because they're playing without Logan Cooley right now, one of their best young players, one of their leading scorers, and he's out with an injury. He's going to be reevaluated after the Four Nations break, and so hopefully by then we've got Logan Cooley back. Defenseman Sean Durzi, who I mentioned a moment ago, he's got the non-contact jersey off in practice, so hopefully he's back by the time we return from Four Nations break. So there should be some reinforcements on the way after the break, and I think this team is trying to just hold serve and stay in the fight as long as they can ahead of the break, because again, this is where the top teams start to separate themselves, as we're seeing across the league. And Utah's still in it. They're 3 games back, and they really need to have a strong finish to the year. They need to have a strong road trip here in these 3 games. But they are certainly in it, and it's going to be fun. This is right where this team wanted to be at the start of the year, playing meaningful games late in the year.
Yeah, the top 6 spots in the West seem to be all but locked up. And you look at the bottom, and L.A. right now is at 60 points, and Calgary has that other wild card spot along with Colorado. They're at 59. Utah got a little help last night with Calgary losing. That 6-point gap or that 7-point gap, from somebody who covers hockey, how difficult is it to make up for that gap? How realistic is it for the Utah Hockey Club to be able to make up that gap here once Four Nations is over?
Well, pretty soon we're going to start getting into magic number territory, right? Where you're hoping that number gets down to 0 because that means you're in the postseason. And I do think actually that third spot in the Central might be a little bit vulnerable with Minnesota. They've had some some injury issues with Kirill Kaprizov. They've only won 4 of their last 10. I could see Colorado definitely making a push to get into that third spot in the Central, and perhaps Minnesota, a team that Utah's beat twice already, by the way. They could fall back into the wild card conversation. I'm looking at the standings here, and 3 games, it is tough to make up in hockey. Now, the good thing is, we're, 52, 53 games through the season, 53 games for Utah. So you have 2.5 months left with which to work. Like, that's a lot of time. There's really nobody except maybe the San Jose Sharks and the Chicago Blackhawks at the very bottom of the standings. There's really nobody who's all the way out of it right now. Utah is very much in the mix, but 3 games, that's not something that you can expect to make up in a week. I mean, that's gonna take a couple weeks unless the team you're chasing has just a catastrophic meltdown. So picking up points is vital, but not just getting to overtime, but getting that win in overtime is going to be crucial. We saw Utah come up short in a couple of overtimes this last homestand. Those were a couple disappointing finishes, but at least you do get to that extra period and give yourself a little bit of cushion. But you look at the teams that Utah's chasing, Vancouver and Calgary, and Utah's a perfect 3-0 against those teams. And so you feel good about Utah stacking up against the teams that they're going up against.
Well, you see, Mike, going out on the road with this team and seeing kind of their attitude across this one. How has it been, kind of seeing what they're like on the road, and how do they attack these road games?
Attitude's been really good. This has been for whatever reason, a much better team on the road. In Utah, they're 3 games above 500 on the road. They're 3 games below 500 at home, which is backwards compared to what you would normally expect. And I think this team, I don't think it's as much this team is better on the road. I think this team just puts a little bit more pressure on itself at home. The atmosphere inside Delta Center it's something. Like, we go around the league and we see these other venues, and what we saw on a Tuesday night, no less, on a Tuesday night in the mountains last night against Philly, like that was special, and that was really fun to be a part of. And I think this team really wants to please the home crowd in this new market, and so that they're gripping the sticks a little tighter. And we've heard the players say as much. We've heard Bear say this himself as well. So I think it's not as much that they're so much better on the road. It's just that they've fallen down on their faces a couple times at home in moments where they're putting pressure on themselves to win. And if they can get this home record figured out, then they'll be a playoff team. If they can get it to look like their road record, they'll be a playoff team. But the guys enjoy being around each other. You see, especially a lot of the older guys, they like to go out, have a dinner. Nobody's like drinking or anything the night before, but maybe after a game you go out and have a glass of wine or something like that. And it's a great time to kind of remove distractions and focus on your teammates and focus on hockey. And that's what we got these next couple days.
Mike Folta, radio play-by-play voice of the Utah Hockey Club. Looking forward to these next 3 games before the break, and pulling for this team to be able to get as many points as possible before they hit that break. So thanks for joining us as usual, man, and safe travels out there, and we'll chat when you get back.
Yep, and don't take home any dogs without my permission.
Okay,
I need to see him first.
Come down and get one before you hit the road, Mike.
Yeah, put your money where your mouth is. Get these dogs going. Come on.
I need a roommate first. I'm gone too much.
This could be it. All right, Mike, we appreciate it, man. There you go.
All right, thanks, guys.
Mike Folta, everybody.